Former manager ends my job at the company I loved. I helped end his career in local tech forever. Posted by Level or Cleverer 9. This is my first one of these. I hope it qualifies. Apologies for this being so long, but I've had to keep this story to myself for more than a decade. Ironically, a recent court ruling means I'm now free to discuss the details publicly for the first time without penalty. I'm starting with here. The background. I worked at a very big tech company for a very long time, like decades. Over the years, I'd worked my way up from being a noob to a kind of specialist fixer. I became fairly well known internally as a security and emergency response person. I got assigned the bad or unfixable projects, many of which made news headlines. I have many stories that I can never tell publicly, sadly. Suffice it to say that multiple senior vice presidents in various divisions got to know who I was, because I effectively wrangled gnarly and complex problems and herded many intense tech nerds together to resolve big things in multiple divisions over the years. It was so fun. At the time of our story, I was working on a small security team in a product engineering division. It was a somewhat turbulent time, and our team of 8 had weathered multiple reorganizations and had so many manager changes. It was a lot, but we kept our heads down and we did the work, and we all got along just fine. Sidebar, and relevant later, that one of the better managers assigned to run our team immediately assigned me a huge and complicated and urgently important project to manage. It would involve people in 6 different divisions, had seriously big legal implications, and our senior VP wanted it to happen by an aggressive deadline within like 4 to 6 weeks. Oh, and my manager was leaving imminently on a long-planned vacation, so he apologetically would be away for the next 3 weeks and unable to assist. This project was to do something big and technical and which had never been done before, so no one was entirely sure how to do it, or who all it would require, or what steps in what order. Some of the key players had what we gently called difficult personalities too. And by the way, it would definitely make international news and cause a ripple in the industry when we did it. No big whoop. Manager was a decent guy and he felt bad about leaving me with this thorny mess. And I did it. We got all the people from all the divisions in a room and mapped it all out on a whiteboard. It took days, and hashed out how to do it before the deadline. Actually, well before for bonus points. And we lined everyone up to get it done. Before we pulled the actual trigger on the very big thing, I had to attend a meeting with the VP and exec leadership, which was several levels of management above me, and with the legal team to present the plan and to assure all the execs that we were ready and had it all handled. So I looked the VP in the eye and assured him that I got this. And then I did. The team did the big thing sooner than the deadline. It was flawless. We rocked that. Woohoo, yeah, just another day at the office, right? The inept manager. A few months after that epic project, our good manager left us for another role, and someone new moved over from an unrelated division out of nowhere. We'll call him Inept Manager. Inept Manager did not know anything about security. He didn't know anything about emergency response, and he didn't know anything about what our division did. In fact, no one on our team had ever heard of this guy. He was the worst kind of middle manager, self-important, dismissive of everyone, cares most about appearances and ego, micromanages stuff he doesn't comprehend, and just makes everything worse. But he apparently knows people, and those people get him job assignments because of politics, loyalty. He certainly didn't have any skills or experience for our team. Ugh, that guy was the worst. One of Inept Manager's many weird quirks was that he didn't think it was appropriate for our team to disagree with or correct each other in front of other people. Things in tech, specifically product development, move pretty quickly and things change all the time. So if some of our team was meeting with someone from another team and something was like, so we decided to make the sky green and we're on schedule. And someone else on our team chimed in to say, actually that's changed. We decided that the sky is now going to be blue and we pushed the deadline back 2 weeks. That just actually happened in an earlier meeting. Oh, okay, cool. Inept Manager would interrupt and say, we clearly need to get on the same page. Let's end this meeting right now and reschedule when my team has all the facts straight. What? That's insane! We'd literally never have any meetings if we waited until everyone knew all the same information all the time. Other teams would routinely leave meetings with us with inaccurate info, which affected release schedules and resources, and it was just a mess. Inept manager hostility. Shortly after Inept Manager became our manager, he started being really hostile to me. Not to everyone on the team, just me. As far as I knew, I hadn't done or said anything to earn his hostility. Suddenly, after 20 plus years at this company, I could do nothing right. While this jerk didn't actually understand most of what my job was, he was sure I wasn't doing it right. And he was quick to tell me so, and often in front of others. To the point my coworkers would take me aside and ask me what the heck is going on. I didn't know either. The thing is, I was the only woman on the team, and I have a disability. Now, I've been through some things working in high tech over those decades. It was very much an old boys club back then, and I was fine. I'm not one to claim discrimination at the drop of a hat or for no reason. However, when I was trying to piece together the cause of this dude's hostility, some of his comments were sexist and not at all subtle. He also didn't like that due to my disability, and frankly, my seniority, I was given one of the few offices with a door on it in our new building. The rest of the team was in open floor plan cubicles, which everyone hated. He was incensed that I, a lowly direct report and woman, got an office and he didn't. I had more seniority than just about anyone, so even without my disability, I'd have scored the office ahead of him. Note that other men in our division got offices too, because again, seniority, and that bothered him less. But I was the only woman on our floor with a door, and I was his subordinate. His ego did not like it, not one bit. He threw a fit about it, repeatedly. There were lots of other things that he said. My favorite among them towards the end was him reprimanding me for my bad attitude in a meeting that we had just had. Inept Manager told me beforehand not to say anything during that meeting because he was insisting on sharing incorrect information again, and he knew I'd want to correct it. So I sat quietly and kept my eyes on the PowerPoint presentation or the floor nearly the whole time. When I asked him how I'd had a bad attitude when I hadn't said anything, as he requested, I didn't like the look on your face. Okay, dude. After realizing there was nothing that I could do to make this guy happy with my work and to lose his hostility, I finally went to HR to go on the record. I knew they'd do crap all about it, but I wanted to document it at least. So, predictably, they told me to work harder at getting along with Inept Manager. And because it wasn't my first rodeo, I went back to my office and emailed HR saying, "Hey, thanks for the meeting with me about my concerns about Inept Manager. I fear his bias and misogyny will reflect negatively in my next performance review. HR should be aware that there is a real problem here, and I hope you'll take steps and blah 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 blah." Which of course, they didn't. But now it was on the record. The axe falls. And then a few months later, he gave me a terrible performance review, as expected. Long story already long, he was trying to fire me for underperformance. And unfortunately for me, the company had started rounds of layoffs all over, and it was the worst possible time to be looking for another job internally. And now I had a bad performance review on my record too. I went back to HR and said, "Hey, that last thing that I said, I was worried would happen when we met 6 months ago. That happened, exactly as I said. Now what?" HR, once again, was no help. Also, they'd done literally nothing. But hey, it was on the record, again, helpful for the attorney later. Blah, blah, blah. When I realized that I couldn't find a new gig at my company because of all the layoffs, I scored a new job for much more money at a different local tech company, and pretty quickly. I live in a tech-heavy area. There was lots of shuffling between 3 and 4 big companies during this time period. We'd often bump into each other like company veterans at these other companies. It was a small world. With my track record and references, it was super easy. After that was lined up, I called an employment discrimination attorney to negotiate my exit from the company that I thought I'd work at until I retired. Sad face. Because I had documentation with HR explaining Inept Manager's misogyny and ableism going back for some time, and because they'd done crap all about it, and because there were witnesses who confirmed his behavior, they had no leg to stand on. They agreed to write me a relatively nice check to go away and not to sue them, and I agreed to not talk about the details of my separation agreement. I went down to my lawyer's office and signed the agreement, and I looked to see who had signed the agreement for the company. I assumed it would be someone in HR, but it was still blank. I'd eventually get a copy once someone there signed it, so I took my check, I packed up my office, and left. Goodbye, old company. I started my new job a few weeks later. Karma begins. This was August of that year that I left. I got my copy of the executed contract in the mail in October. Who signed it for the company? Not HR, but my exec VP, the one who asked for the urgent, highly important, legally complicated project, the guy I looked in the eye personally and then delivered on this very big thing he personally asked for before the deadline he asked for. That is who signed off on my separation agreement. I suspect that he had no idea until that moment that I was gone. And I imagine that he likely had many questions about what the heck had happened. And also, why did they have to pay me a chunk of money on the way out? Whoops. I chortled when I saw it. Since the VP knew me and we had some history, and Inept Manager was new to the division and was one of the hundreds of middle managers he'd likely never heard of, I'm guessing Inept Manager had some explaining to do. I really enjoyed the thought of that. Karma for real. Cut to November. As I mentioned, it was a relatively small tech company in the area, and those of us who worked in security, in particular at Company X, would often encounter other current and former colleagues at Company Y or Z or whatever. Heck, there was a ton of poaching going on between the companies. One day, I got an in-company chat from someone who'd worked in security at my old company. We'll call her Security Colleague. Security Colleague asked me if I knew someone named Inept Manager. Why, yes, I did. Why? Because Inept Manager was appearing on Security Colleague's schedule to interview for an open management position the very next day. It seems that shortly after my former exec VP had signed my separation agreement contract, Inept Manager was actively looking for a new job at a new company. Security Colleague asked me what I thought about Inept Manager, and I said, I can't really talk about it for legal reasons, which, boom, everyone knows what that means. But if you wanted to ring my personal cell phone later this evening to catch up on old times, please do. She did. I hypothetically shared some stories with her about Inept Manager. I also told her where his hot buttons are, the appearance and ego thing, the dominant stuff, and so on and blah blah blah. And all about his misogyny and ableism, which was perfect since she was conducting his interview. I may have shared some specific scenarios and questions to ask, which I knew would set him off. I wished her luck, and for the love of all that is holy, please call me after, when appropriate, and tell me how it all went. It did not go well for Inept Manager. When Security Colleague rang me, I couldn't wait. How did it go? Well, he got combative and angry and yelled at me twice during his interview to be hired as a manager. There were lots more details now lost to time, except at that company, interview loops were assessed as such. You're either a strong hire for this role, a hire but not for this role, so it's not a good fit for this job but we like them, no hire, or no hire ever, not for any role. Inept Manager's interview was rated that last one, no hire ever. Blacklisted from any job ever at one of the biggest tech companies in the world, after being pushed out the door of one of the other biggest tech companies in the world. Derp. Shortly after that, it appeared that Inept Manager moved himself and his wife and kids a few states away to work at a smaller company in another region. It took less than 6 months from when I left my old company for him to be gone as well. What gets me still is that Inept Manager thought I was so inconsequential, so unimportant, that he didn't bother to check and see where I landed after he forced me out of the company I loved. And when he had to look for a job himself shortly thereafter, it also never occurred to him that I've had connections with, thousands of colleagues that I'd worked with over the years, some of whom can now be working at Company X or Y or Z, or where he was interviewing, and where I'd scored a huge raise for myself. To this day, he doesn't know why his interview at Company Y tanked so badly. And since security colleague was not legally precluded from sharing stories she had heard through the grapevine about inept managers' management problems, it's possible that other of our old security colleagues at Company Z and other companies in the area heard those stories too, which means he's unlikely to get a job at any major tech company in this area, maybe ever. Definitely not at X or Y, and they are big companies, among the biggest. And it's all because he's a butthole, ableist, misogynist middle manager who underestimated little old me. ProRevenge. Way to go, OP. That was nasty because you had this person who had this position of power that they thought they could rule the world. They took that position and did not realize the power that those under them had, all the connections, the secret things that they didn't know, that they didn't think to look up. But because you had those years in the experience, because you had that ground floor level, you're in that down flow level, you know what's going on below, you know how it operates. He doesn't. He thinks he has a clear space to go and look, but he clearly does not. And when you can take your knowledge that you've accumulated over those years, when you can strike under this middle manager that does not know anything, that thinks he can do what's cool, that thinks he can rule the world, that is how you execute pure pro-revenge. Connections, compliance, and destruction. Pro-revenge. Way to go, OP. Bridezilla Karen ends up looking like a pauper at her own wedding. Posted by Forest Cabin 123K. I, a 48-year-old female, have known Pat, also 48 female, for decades. As far as I can remember, she was fixated on having 5 children and a picket fence dream life. I slowly cut ties with her in college because she was an opportunist and I didn't trust her. She's both manipulative and forceful. Her idea of cute rubs me the wrong way. Pat likes to walk like a penguin when she wants to elicit pity, and she usually does this when she wants to evoke the underdog narrative. I've never seen someone act so despicable and ridiculous at the same time. I moved on with my life, happily got rid of her for years. Pat eventually found me on Facebook, and I accepted her friend request out of politeness. Pat has become the epitome of a permissive mother. Her 5 kids do as they please, and she never calls them out. She tried to force the relationship between me and her daughters and made them call me auntie. Pat tried to drop them at my house uninvited. Her phone calls were insistent. She tried to monopolize my time, and she began to show up at my job. I created some boundaries, so she tried to find loopholes. It was a nightmare. My husband and I hosted a party for the community center, not the real name, new members. The community center is actually a very informal initiative, and my husband and I mainly serve the homeless population. We prefer to help strangers instead of catering to potentially narcissistic acquaintances. We don't mind lending a hand, but we have encountered truly dishonest choosing beggars. There are other services, like one of the members who helps women get their wedding and prom dresses for free. The community center location, headquarters, is actually a farm owned by an elderly couple. There's a barn, a venue, and a very nice green field with an artificial lake and some fowl. They charge for the use of their facilities, like weddings and so on, but not for community-oriented stuff. Pat had always been salty at her husband for demanding that she go back to work after baby number 3. In the meantime, he worked 3 jobs. She demanded he get her pregnant to fulfill her dream of having 5 kids. He didn't agree because he was already nearly 45 and felt like he might never be able to retire. She got away with bringing new babies into this world anyway. Her fascination with being pregnant comes from all the attention she gets. She had at least 1 miscarriage in between each kid. Pat latched onto our group. She never missed any of our activities, and I hated having her in my house. But it was an open invitation that included virtually everyone, and she was very active as an event organizer. I didn't like the way her kids behaved. We have a designated area for parties and entertainment, but her kids ended up inside my bedroom. We ended up having to keep watch of them and enjoyed 0 of our own party. I called her days later to get my point across regarding their overall behavior, but she completely cut me off and began talking about herself and said her kids wanted to come visit again and use our pool. I never answered that. I didn't want to say, "No, I will not have your brats over." She also called me as summer was approaching, specifically to let me know her middle daughter was bored and wanted to spend a week at our home. I politely declined, citing that me and my husband have to work and cannot entertain guests. Pat paid no heed. Her kid called me on the weekend, calling me auntie, and attempted to coax me by saying, "Mom says you invited me to spend summer with you." I quickly clarified and offered an explanation to avoid hurting a kid's self-esteem. Never mind, her daughter just hung up on me. Pat's Facebook also showed some red flags. Some cryptic rants here and there were visible, along with friends' comments and complaints on how she asked a particular person to watch her kids only for a couple of hours and ended up leaving them all day. Another one of her friends criticized her girls' night out because Pat had just asked them to be patient and wait until she could pay back some money that she owed them, yet she had money to spend on Friday night outings. I thought those very public comments on private matters were more like a cry of lost patience. Unpleasant things began to happen, like the time she volunteered to wrap the Christmas presents for underprivileged kids. We all wanted to create a mix of less costly gifts with some really nice ones. Surprisingly, some nice and eye-catching toys and games went missing, but they turned up under her Christmas tree, courtesy of her mother-in-law's Facebook post. No one could prove anything, but it was hate-inducing. Or the time my daughter called me in tears to pick her up after she attended Pat's daughter's birthday, Casey. My daughter had been ignored all night because she didn't gift her the expensive gaming stuff Casey practically demanded. My daughter did ask, but I said no. We would buy her a very nice and thoughtful present according to her taste. So when I went to pick her up, my daughter was sitting alone in the living room while Casey and her friends stayed outside. Stories about Pat and her family multiplied. The owners at the farm community center decided to keep their gates locked unless they had guests or events because Pat got in the habit of driving in whenever she pleased, and it was either her kids screaming and disturbing ongoing weddings, throwing rocks at the koi in the lake, or harassing the geese in the yard. Or how she stiffed another soccer mom with the lunch bill and then pulled the struggling financially card. Or how other parents hated her because she created unnecessary hostile competition. When my daughter turned 13, I allowed her to wear my grandma's ring. It's not an expensive piece of jewelry, but it's vintage, and girls nowadays want to look boho. My granny gave it to me when I became a teenager, so I passed it on to my kid so she could wear it on her birth week. It was weird that she became quiet and distracted after that. She also didn't want to go to school, and my husband and I became suspicious. She never opened up, and my other kids had no clue. We went to her school, but her teachers assured us that nothing had changed in her environment. My husband and I suspected that she was being bullied, but our kid gave us no tools to support her. My kid is very sunny and very compassionate. She's never had any problems with other kids. So I called her best friend's mom. Natalie, my kid's BFF, told us what was going on. Casey, Pat's eldest, and my daughter had become, quote, close. I knew this and was not too thrilled. I found the age, Casey was 17, gap, not exactly inappropriate, but I'd rather see my daughter spend time with friends in the same age range. Casey is very beautiful and a gifted student. She's also very conceited. To make this story short, she asked my daughter if she could try on the ring and refused to give it back. She later claimed that she lost it, but would look for it, so my daughter was distraught. My daughter kept asking for her ring, and as a result, Casey shunned her and then spread the word that my kid was trying to steal her ring. Some kids at school took Casey's side, and so now Casey just wore my kid's jewelry to school like nothing happened. If that doesn't qualify as taunting, I don't know what does. My guilt comes from not being able to get my daughter to open up and feel safe, telling me the truth. I talked to her, and she burst into tears. I was both pained as a mother and furious that some teenage witch was doing this under our noses. I went straight to Pat's car after school, and I asked to talk as Casey was about to go in. So I grabbed Casey's hand and I asked to see her jewelry. Casey froze, and she tried to make a fist, so I became relentless. Casey yelled, "Mom!" and then Pat struggled to get out of the car. I slid the ring off. See, Casey has tiny hands, and she wore the ring on her index finger. First, Pat yelled at me. After I confronted her with the engraving on the band, my grandma's maiden name, she argued that it was loaned to her daughter by my kid. Then she said that she bought it. I paid no heed. I did warn them that I knew Casey had become an abusive friend of my daughter. Pat called me to tell me off. She said that she was trying to raise an assertive young woman, and I had just messed that up by being, quote, overbearing. She never apologized for her thief of a child. Pat's husband, Hank, is what can be described as a doormat. Pat wore him down to a knob. He had no choice but to obey her to keep the peace. She was a bully who actively withdrew affection when he didn't follow her wishes, even in public. So she got kids number 4 and number 5 after a relentless campaign that included leaving him for 2 months. Her pregnancies were a nuisance because she expected to be treated like the only lady who's ever even been pregnant. She strolled around in a wheelchair almost immediately after getting pregnant, and she would get very sick on weekends, so her kids were often sent to friends and family so that she could rest. Pat systematically bullied Hank. She would leave town and take the kids with her. Poor Hank would look distraught, drinking on his porch or looking just really lonely. This is how she got off the hook and was able to leave her job. Hank had virtually no voice, so she struggled to keep the marriage together. Everyone liked him, but hated her equally. Hank loved to talk to other people, but seemed concerned that Pat would be upset. Over time, according to my husband, Hank began to show signs of depression and mental distress. Our friend, Lena, runs the Wedding and Prom Dress Initiative. It's not complicated. Dresses are sourced from donations, eBay, trunk shows, and so on. Unusually beautiful dresses are retained so that more than one bride gets to wear them. In some cases, a bride will pay $50, but most of the time, the dresses are donated to the bride. Pat was involved in this. Lena kept her in because they never had any issues and her task was limited to just shipping the dresses out. Pat decided to renew her vows, and her bridezilla, Karenzilla attitude became the icing on the cake. For starters, she bullied another couple into giving up their wedding date at the farm because she needed her renewal to match her exact wedding date. They were not impressed with her harassment, so they booked another venue. As a result, the farm owners were ticked because Pat was already costing them money after she had successfully negotiated a cut in their rate because she couldn't afford it but will repay by doing maintenance work around the venue. She never made good on her word. Pat became attached to a particular dress that was already assigned to another bride. Lena made it clear that she would need to pay for her own dress. So, Pat played it cool and shipped the wrong gown instead. She was adamant that it was the right dress, despite all the notes on Lena's agenda. The other bride was truly gracious about it. She was obviously disappointed, but never made a scene. What bothered me most is that I picked that dress and I bought it for $40 at a garage sale. It's not my money, Lena's money. It was a vintage dress, ankle length, white with lots of lace and a huge bargain. Again, when confronted, Pat did a Casey and used the "this is mine" strategy. We felt so bad for the other bride that we did our best to get her something nice to wear. The other bride was a true fighter. She had pulled out of welfare, earned her high school diploma, and was working to get on her feet by trying to earn a certificate as an acrylic nail technician. So, her reward was to have some Karen steal her dress? Pat never admitted to messing up, but just by the fact that she claimed it was her dress, we knew. Lena never allowed her in the warehouse again. Their last phone fight ended with Pat bringing up the other bride's past like it mattered and, quote, "this conversation is over. It's my dress and you are mistaken." That was weeks before the other bride's wedding. Pat went all out on her wedding decor. She spent way too much. She hired a caterer for some food, mainly mimosas and appetizers, but the wedding invitation included a request for specific dishes for her Sunday brunch wedding. Either she ran out of banquet money or was on a complete moocher mode. I picture the penguin walking upon, practically asking everyone to supply her wedding reception grub, and I cringe. There's nothing wrong with potluck weddings. In fact, they can be a nice addition to a very cozy and family-oriented wedding reception. But don't you need to at least be close to your guest in order to ask for such a thing? Even I got an invitation. I told everyone that I wasn't going because I was very uncomfortable being told what to bring and was probably expected to give them a cash gift on top of that. Some of the older ladies in our group agreed. Some said that they would not decline in advance because she is a bully and they didn't want a confrontation. Lena called me the night before Pat's re-wedding. Lena was there to close the Saturday night bingo and Pat was awfully friendly, but that's what she does whenever things are going her way. Lena peeked into the garment bag and saw the exact same dress while Pat was caught up supervising the wedding decoration. The thing with Karens is that they expect everyone to suck it up or make their dreams come true, or they simply underestimate everyone and think we're all fools. Lena is a very straightforward person with a "so sue me" attitude. She told me she would just ruin the dress. After all, it was hers, so she could do whatever she wanted. If Pat wanted to take legal action and should things get ugly, she needed to prove ownership. However, the dress was the same. The marks inside the hem and the tags were the same. Even the tag numbers that were punched to identify each dress for logistic purposes matched. Pat had the dress altered with some extra beading and dyed to a deep cream color, but it was obviously the same garment. Lena and I snuck in before the venue was closed for the night. All brides are allowed to stay in a small bedroom for a small charge so that they don't need to drive in on their wedding day. Honestly, the makeshift chapel was gorgeous. I don't know how she paid for it, but it was full of flowers and presumptuous details. I naively brought in some ink to spill on the dress, but Lena said she wanted, quote, something more awful, like a nasty surprise. Ink would be too obvious, and if she saw it ahead, she may be able to snag another gown from somewhere. No, the ideal thing was to have her trust the dress was fine. So Lena locked herself in a bathroom stall and completely cut out the back panel. She patiently put it back on its hanger and zipped the bag. We left through the emergency door with the back of the dress stuffed inside Lena's purse. I completely hate people who target and steal from anyone they, Pat and her kid, calculate to be in a weaker position. The wedding was scheduled at 9 a.m. Pat called me at 7 a.m., but I ignored her calls. I picked up by 8 a.m., both curious and wondering if she suspected anything. Pat was frantic. She was crying that her dress was missing by half. I purposely made her explain, being annoyingly dense and continually interrupting like she does, and stalling the conversation. She asked me if I could lend her my wedding dress, and I said no, sorry. She then asked me if I would help her get a dress. I was satisfied to remind her that the town's bridal shops were closed on Sunday and the others that would open were almost an hour away. The farm is already almost 1 hour away from our town. If Pat could get a shop to rent a dress, she would need to try the dress on and get it steamed. Even if the dress was ready to wear, it would easily take more than 2 hours round trip. She tried to ask me to go pick a dress. Who would pay for this? And even if a shop were open and they brought her a dress, it would add to the cost. Also, these shops open at 10 or 9:30 at the earliest. By the time they got to her, it would be time to wrap up the wedding because she needed to clear the venue by 12 o'clock for the next event. She broke down and mumbled some stupid stuff I didn't understand. So Pat hung up on me and called Lena instead. She asked Lena to bring her anything she had available. Lena and I ended up delivering the most outdated, moss-smelling, oversized dress. Pat's disappointment was a mix between angry and emotional. She also tried to wear her knee-length silk bridal slip as a wedding dress, but it was too obvious and it looked really cheap. She tried to get her daughter to give her her own dress to wear with an open back zipper due to fitting issues, but Casey refused, asking if she was supposed to attend the wedding naked. She got a point, plus Casey is petite. The dress needed a petticoat to plump up the skirt, which wasn't available. So it dragged all over the floor, and Pat had to keep pulling it up. Pat walked down the aisle with one hand on her bouquet and another one grabbing her dress. The dress looked limp and weird with the arrangements of pins they didn't show that caused the sleeves and the neckline to pucker into messy rims. She spent the ceremony looking uncomfortable and out of place. Very few people attended, but that was not part of any revenge. That was just how people reacted to her entitled attitude. The dress looked awful. I mean, the reception portion of the wedding had all this princely decoration, a very nice cake, and a bridezilla with a dress from hell. I didn't stay, but I was told she was so disappointed that she spent her wedding sulking. There was no dance, no actual speech. She had to change into a shirt and leggings because the dress was too uncomfortable. Everyone talked about how Pat put on her flip-flops and walked around aimlessly until she ordered the ushers to start folding up the chairs within 1 hour of the reception. So she practically kicked everyone out, and the cake was never cut. Pat wasn't the same after this. She was not as loud and avoided everyone. I think she was disappointed that nobody ran to her rescue, not even her family who came from out of town. Her husband finally cracked under all the pressure and sought some help. He was slaving away and coming home to clean the house while Pat used her kids as an excuse to spin like crazy. Hank also had to do kid homework because Pat never had time or never had patience. She also refused to get a part-time job so her kids could attend an after-school and get help with their school stuff. Therapy seemed to help Hank because the last time Pat left with her kids, he didn't seem distraught. He would be riding his bicycle and could be seen more relaxed while mowing his lawn. Hank told my husband that he had complicated taking himself out after their third kid. When Pat returned, he maintained the routine but was interested in going out by himself and doing things for himself. We began to see Pat alone all the time. Hank was seen less and less in the same car and eventually moved in with his parents. He filed for divorce on the grounds of emotional cruelty, and I don't think he won. Instead, I'm not sure of this because this is what I was told, there was some sort of a settlement or agreement that she would not get close or interact with him unless it has to do with the kids. I also don't know if Pat even actually suspected who or what happened to her dress. She slowly pulled away from the community center and became less active in social gatherings. Pat also removed me from her Facebook, as well as mostly everyone from school and the center. Here is the thing about this wild ProRevenge. This Karen just does everything she wants to because nobody really truly stands up to her. Her husband doesn't. He just wants everything to keep the peace and for the kids, and she just runs all over him. Then they finally take some action and then realize, hey, we gotta get rid of this Karen. The whole thing could have been avoided though, however, if OP just had not accepted that initial Facebook request. Look at that butterfly effect, if you've seen that movie, on what happens when one little thing has such a change and impact on the rest. Now this wedding, this revenge, was so nice because Pat never expected it. And then she realized before the wedding, that gave her enough time to worry and sulk and wonder what the heck's going to happen instead of finding out at the wedding. She knew that she would have to just make do with it and run with what she had, holding it up messy and all, looking like complete crap to everybody else. And then the whole thing fell apart, and it's the aftermath that truly makes this pro, because this didn't just impact her wedding, this ruined and impacted her life. The husband, the kids, everything fell apart. Her organization, her confidence, like this seriously destroyed the Karen of Pat. Like the one event, that butterfly effect again, came back hard and completely destroyed this Karen and everything she knew and loved. Coworker tried to get me fired over breast implants, so I pulled a reverse Uno card, posted by Deleted. 4 years ago now, when I was 24, my mom died of breast cancer. And as both of my grandmothers had also died of it, I saw a specialist for a screening. I found out that I had some cells in one of my breasts that could have turned cancerous at any given moment. I was told I had a few options. Number 1, I could have regular screenings every 3 or 4 months until it does develop into cancer. Now, I was told the risk of the cells becoming cancerous was very high due to family history, but it could also potentially never turn, so I'd just be getting these screenings for no reason. Number 2, I could get a single mastectomy on the breast with the bad cells, but they'd need to keep an eye on the other one, so I'd still need regular checkups for the other breast. And number 3, I could get a bilateral mastectomy and remove all of my breast tissue, basically eliminating the risk. I went for the bilateral mastectomy. It was admittedly the most drastic option, but after seeing what cancer did to my mom and grandmothers, I didn't want to risk it. I was warned about scarring, but told it should be fairly minor. It wasn't, and I was left with 2 huge, pink, jagged scars on either side of my chest, each about 1 inch long and 1/2 inch wide, and it caused me to go into a severe depression, where it got to the stage of me not even wanting to leave my flat because I didn't want people to see me throwing out my mirrors and getting physically sick of looking at myself. I went to a therapist who suggested a plastic surgeon. The therapist said they'd never normally do that, but it was clearly something that I was struggling with and I might never get over it, and the therapist could see why I struggle with it. Although, I'll admit, the therapist did send me to ask about scar reduction. The plastic surgeon suggested a cream, a laser, or implants. The cream didn't work, and the laser was both expensive and risky, so I went with the implants. My natural boobs were an F cup, so I went with a slightly smaller double D. Since then, my mental health has improved, and I feel a lot better about the way I look. My confidence has gone up, as has my self-esteem. I know I shouldn't put so much into my appearance, but I wasn't exaggerating about these scars. Huge, bright pink, jagged, raised, just really awful to look at, and I hated seeing myself. And they are now nicely hidden away and you can barely feel them. In the present day, I'm 28 years old and working in an office. I'm doing a lot better than I was. My coworker, Jill, found out I'd had a boob job, but not about the cancer thing, when myself and my friend from years before the mastectomy were planning a holiday and she made a joke about me going on a plane with my implants, and Jill overheard. By the end of the day, the entire office knew I'd had a boob job, but not why, and 6 people confirmed Jill had told them. Over the next few months, Jill made many jokes and comments about my chest to coworkers when I was in earshot, and at one point saying I had more plastic than Barbie, and calling me fake in 2 ways. I didn't hear this one myself, but a friend in the office told me that Jill had at one point referred to me as a sack of silicone. I don't know what her problem was exactly, but at one point she mentioned the NHS, so I assumed Jill thought that I got my stuff done for free on taxpayer money. I'd gotten the mastectomy on NHS, but gone private for therapy and implants. I asked her to stop more than once, but unfortunately, the places I'd talked to her were places like the lift and the women's bathroom, where there weren't many cameras, and Jill just kept making comments no matter how often I asked her not to. I wouldn't say it was every single day, but I heard at least 3 comments per week for 3 months. I hit my breaking point when me, Jill, and a few other coworkers were having lunch. I referred to something as being shallow, and Jill said, "You know all about being shallow," while gesturing to my chest. I snapped. I said, "Do you know why I have these? A few years ago, the doctors found potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I was advised to get a mastectomy, and I was left with huge, ugly scars on my chest. I went to see a therapist who sent me for a cosmetic surgeon who advised me to get implants to hide the scars, and I did, just so I could look at myself in the mirror without crying. So maybe next time you want to judge someone for having cosmetic surgery, you should ask them why they had it first." And feeling like that was a mic drop moment, I picked up my food and left. For the rest of the day, I had about 1/3 of my office come up to me and offer support, and the rest tell me that Jill was just joking around and I was being a little witch. I replied that Jill was being a witch long before I was. I then got an email from HR saying they wanted to talk to me the following day, And when I called for clarification, they mentioned a, quote, hostile work environment. Now, as a note, this is apparently an American term and it holds little weight in England, but it's what was said over the phone. I knew the person who signed off the email and I had spoken to. Her name was Debbie, and she was Jill's friend in HR, so I was fairly confident on who had reported me. I realized that if this was already being sent to HR, I needed as much ammunition as possible, so I went about collecting my information. As Debbie had dealt with me so far, it was safe to assume that she would be the person reviewing the complaint with me, and if that was true, I was screwed. However, I vaguely remembered a section on complaints that was in my contract when I first signed with the company. I flicked through the contract, and there was a part in complaints section that said I was contractually allowed to request a change of reviewer if I felt my allocated reviewer was biased. It was called an impartial overseer. I photocopied the page and highlighted that part. Then I messaged the people who had offered their support over Facebook and said basically, hey, HR have asked to see me. Do any of you remember Jill insulting me to your face and are willing to write and sign something saying what you heard and when? Not everyone was willing to help, as Jill is somewhat feared in the office due to her befriending HR and the management, but about 20 people were willing to help me. I guessed roughly when I'd asked Jill to stop previously. The 4 asks over the last few months, some timings were, well, easy to guess as they'd happened on my break or when I'd first arrived at work, and I wrote them all down, along with a rough time of when the lunchroom confrontation happened, and a list of names of who was there for the lunchroom confrontation. I got to work slightly early the next morning. I went round everyone who had messaged me, and most of them managed to give me a printed and signed letter. Now, some didn't manage to write one, but no big deal. This isn't exact words, as there's 16 letters to sum up here, but the gist was: my name is their name. I work with Jill last name and OP. On date and approximate time, I spoke with Jill last name, during which she referred to OP as quoted insult. I felt this was inappropriate as it directly related to OP's appearance, and am willing to go on record further to establish that Jill last name has been discussing OP in the workplace in the same manner for 3 months now, causing me discomfort and creating what I feel is a hostile work environment. Signed, their name. I wound up with about 16 letters, all from different people, and one of them was in the lunchroom for my conversation with Jill. Some even had bullet-pointed lists of everything Jill had said to them about me or other people. As it turns out, Jill has issues with a lot of people's appearances. She apparently made comments about one worker's weight and something anti-Semitic about a different worker's nose, all of which were put in these letters. There are about 45 people in the office, so while 16 wasn't a majority, it's still a decent amount. The letters weren't hugely long, most were only like a paragraph, but they had all the necessary information. I was asked to come to HR at 10 a.m. I took the letters from coworkers, the photocopy of the page in my contract, and my dates and times in a little folder with me. I got there, and Debbie was the one overseeing the interview. She got up from her desk, ready to lead me into another room. I immediately turned to the other HR worker that was currently there and said, "So is my meeting with you then?" Debbie said, "No, you're with me." I replied that this wouldn't sit well with me, as my contract states I have a right to an impartial overseer. And as I said this, I took the contract page out of my folder. Debbie read it, I wouldn't let her take the paper when there was a shredder so close by, and said that she could be impartial. I replied that I really didn't mean to be a pain, but I had it on good authority that the person on the other end of this complaint is her friend, and my contract does say that I'm allowed an impartial overseer. Debbie stomped off to get that supervisor. Supervisor asked how I know she can't be impartial, and I tell him that I have it on good authority that the Jill, who is on the other end of this complaint, is a close friend of Debbie. He asked Debbie if this was true, to which she only replied, "I can be impartial." Supervisor took a deep breath, and asked the other HR rep to come with him, and all the 4 of us all went to review the complaint. I thanked them for being so accommodating, and I was worried that I'd annoyed them, and Debbie took out the complaint, and all 3 of them went through it with me. Debbie looked homicidal the whole time the interview was happening, as she clearly had anticipated firing me, or at least recommending me being fired. The interview went something like this. It took like over a half an hour, and they kept asking me the same questions, but phrased different ways, so this is really a drastically condensed version. Starts with a question saying, "You said outside that you think Jill last name reported you. Why is this?" Replied, "Jill has had an issue with me for about 3 months now." "Why didn't you come to us when you realized Jill had an issue?" "Well, I had no issue with her." "What issue does Jill have with you?" "Well, 4 years ago, a specialist identified potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I had surgery to remove my breast tissue, thereby removing the cells and the risk. After the surgery, I was left with large scars on my chest. I went to a therapist for low self-esteem and depression. The therapist suggested a plastic surgeon who suggested breast implants to cover my scars. All of this is in my medical history, which you have a copy of in my file and my full permission to review. Jill found out about my breast implants but didn't know about the cancer. Jill had a problem with my breast implants and decided to communicate this problem to our coworkers." "Why do you feel this is true?" Here's 16 signed statements, all from different coworkers, all testifying that Jill told the entire office I'd had breast implants on the day she found out, and has since made comments about these implants frequently. They have quotes of what Jill said to them about it and rough dates and times. Rough dates and times? No one knew this would be escalated to such an extent, so no one really took notes as to when it happened. What event or events do you think directly led to this complaint of harassment? For me, harassment began when Jill told everyone about my breast implants without my consent. But as to the complaint placed against me, it would probably be what happened at about this time yesterday in the lunchroom. Jill made a comment about me being shallow while gesturing to my breast, and I replied by giving her an abridged version of my relevant medical history, and ending with a comment about the importance of getting the full story. There are cameras in the lunchroom, so I'm sure you'll be able to find that conversation. I'll admit I could have handled the situation better, but after 3 months, I felt I had to put my foot down. Here's a list of names of people who were also present. There were 6 people at the table, including myself and Jill. One of these people is also in those letters and has written their account of the conversation and signed it. Had you had a conversation with Jill prior to this regarding her comments about you? Several, spaced out over the last 3 months. Each time I communicated to her that I felt uncomfortable and upset with these comments she was making, and I would appreciate it if she were to stop. To your knowledge, was Jill made aware of your former cancer at any point in this time? No, it wasn't mentioned in the conversation with my friend that she overheard, and I didn't tell her because, well, frankly, it's none of her business, and I didn't feel the need to detail my medical history to a coworker in order to avoid further sexual harassment. Supervisor stands up and says, "Well, I think we're done here." He shakes my hand and sends me back to my desk, saying that I'd hear from them after they review the evidence, like letters, CCTV, medical history, and anything that they'd had already, and made a decision on the case. I got back to my desk, pulled up my CV, and prepared to start the job search again. About an hour goes by. Then the person who wrote the letter and was there for the lunchroom conversation gets called for a meeting with HR. They come back 10-ish minutes later. The other people who were also there for the lunchroom conversation get called one by one, except Jill. All of them are gone for about 10 minutes and then come back, find a coworker, and say that HR wants to see them. Then the people who wrote letters but weren't there yesterday are also called one by one and are each gone for about 10 minutes, some longer, some shorter. By about 3:30, it looks like everyone who wrote a letter or was there in the lunchroom has been interviewed. Then, finally, Jill gets called in. She's gone for about 30 minutes and comes back fuming. She glares at me while I work, but I ignore her. 4:30ish, Jill gets called into HR again. 5 p.m. rolls around and everyone is either leaving or getting ready to leave when Jill storms back into the office. She glares at me the whole time she packs up her desk. She then starts telling anyone who will listen that I got her fired before shoving her way onto the lift. an email comes in from HR. My case is closed. This is just a true blue classic because cancer is a horrible, horrible thing, and I don't wish it on anybody. If you've never come across it, that is a blessing, because for those of us who have seen it, it is just terrible. And to just go and insult your coworker over a decision they made that you don't know the backstory, you don't know the medical history about, especially something as devastating and corrupt and just terrible as cancer, then you just keep shoving it, going, pushing, and not stopping. You deserve that punishment. OP does not, and you do, Jill. Jill, you have failed. HR, Debbie, was going to try to save you. OP knew this, did her due diligence, just completely destroyed the whole situation, got the revenge, got that malicious compliance, pro-nuclear everything, and came out on top. Jill, you should be ashamed. OP, you rock. Step Monster tried to hijack our baby shower, posted by Dr. Oogie Boogie 42. My fiancée Jane found out she was pregnant in June 2021, and we announced it to our immediate families in August. At first, Step Monster was completely uninterested in our baby. Not that I expected much from the woman whose reaction to our pregnancy announcement was to ask Jane if she was sure it was mine. Even my dad berated her for that one, but she barely seemed to acknowledge the fact that we were expecting. Instead, she was more interested in my stepbrother, who was also engaged and would give her beautiful grandbaby soon. No complaints. We didn't want her involved, and we didn't even have to say anything. Planning our baby shower was complicated. Both me and Jane would have to work until the holidays, and I wanted to be involved. The due date was in February 2022, so we decided on early January as the best period of time. We enlisted 2 people as planners, my sister Laura, just realized I'd never given her a name, and Jane's best friend Nina. Me and Jane are mostly laid-back people. We didn't want a big party, nor did we want to spend too much money on it. We were saving for both our baby and the wedding. We decided early on that the shower would be co-ed. It would also have to be indoors, again, January, and we settled on a guest list of 25 people, plus about a dozen kids. We came up with the idea of a pizza party. Me, Jane, and Luke, which is my brother-in-law and surrogate son, have had homemade pizza nights weekly since I moved in, and we thought it would be fun to incorporate that into the shower. Nina found an event venue with a pizza oven, and Laura figured out ways to incorporate classic baby shower stuff into the theme. The resulting plans were awesome. Make your own pizzas, non-alcoholic drinks, and plain bodysuits for the kids to customize. Nina and Laura mixed pizza decor with baby decor and found pizza-shaped sweets. It almost seemed messy, but I was surprised that they made it work, but we loved it. Most of the planning was finished by the middle of November. Well, later that month, my stepbrother's fiancée left him for her ex. They'd been together for 4 years at that point, and it was both sudden and traumatizing for him. He was devastated. Stepmonster then realized the grandkids that she dreamed of would take longer to come than she thought. So, naturally, without her son's milestones to obsess over, she moved on to mine. Suddenly, Stepmonster went from aloof relative to excited grandma-to-be. Facebook post, tacky, promoted to Nana shirts, the whole 9. At first, we were too busy finishing things up at work and getting ready for the holidays to worry about that. But it didn't take long for her to start pestering us about planning the baby shower as well as a gender reveal. We denied the possibility of a gender reveal party. No offense to those who like them, but we don't. Plus, we had decided to wait until birth to find out the sex. Stepmonster tried to get us to find out and tell her as a Christmas present, but we didn't. We also denied her the baby shower. She told my father, and he told Laura into letting Stepmonster help out with the plans. She was still living with him at the time, so she didn't have much of a choice. She called Nina and they met Stepmonster for coffee. Though I wasn't there for that meeting, Laura told me what happened later. Before they could even mention their plans, Stepmonster started talking about hers. According to Laura, she pulled a shockingly thick binder, complete with the words, "Oh baby," on the cover, colorful tabs, and pieces of fabric poking out from her bag, and skipped to the shower section. It was short compared to the rest of the binder, but still long. And it was all to describe her one and only baby shower project. Laura sent me pictures and, oh boy, I'll give her this. It looked like the most Instagrammable baby shower ever. That being said, it was also barely functional and obviously expensive. There were balloons and oversized teddy bears, giant alphabet blocks, and cringeworthy signs everywhere. Stepmonster was going for pretty over-cozy with uncomfortable chairs and some fancy food ideas that didn't look edible. Most of them had soft cheeses, which Jane couldn't eat. The color palette was just 3 different shades of pink with gold accents. We'd be fine with a pink baby shower if it at least tried to mix things up a little, but Stepmonster's pictures looked like Barbie had puked all over Hello Kitty's birthday party. When Nina tried to remind her that we didn't know the sex, Stepmonster said that she just knew it was a girl. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Stepmonster also wanted an all-female, child-free party with fancy caterers and alcohol. She had written down a guest suggestion list containing some of her closest friends, and neither mine nor Jane's moms were on it. And planned party games that nobody had any interest in trying out. Basically, the only thing everyone could agree on was to hold the party indoors. Laura and Nina weren't given an opportunity to show her their plans until she was done. Once they could, they explained that while they could find a way to incorporate some of Stepmonster's ideas, they'd already settled on the pizza theme. She tried to protest, but Laura stated that it was kind of them to even offer that, as the shower was a month away and we'd already greenlit their plans. Stepmonster even called me to try to get them to change their minds, but I just repeated their words. My dad had found out that he couldn't come to the shower, so he didn't get a say in anything anymore. The holidays came around, and the subject was dropped. Stepmonster seemed to be okay with the pizza party. Nina managed to pair some of the pink decor she'd wanted with matching blue stuff and even added one of the huge teddy bears. Fast forward to a week before the shower. Jane was almost 8 months pregnant. Everything had been bought, all the guests had RSVP'd, and pretty much anything was ready to go. The shower was set to start at 7 p.m. Stepmonster offered to get to the venue earlier to prepare everything, and well, Laura agreed, mostly because she knew that Stepmonster would complain if she didn't get to do anything, and the venue even let them drop off their decorations before the party. Me and Jane promised to get there at 6. 2 days before the shower, however, the venue called Nina. They told her that Stepmonster had dropped by to drop off large, heavy boxes of what she called a little surprise for us. She'd informed them that she planned on showing up at 3:30 p.m. to start setting it up. They were calling to reinforce that the venue was only booked past 4 p.m. since Stepmonster almost threw a tantrum when they told her that. All of the decor was still at Nina's place, so she called Laura to check if they'd left anything with Stepmonster. Thankfully, my sister is both smart and used to this crap, so she drove to the venue the next day and asked to see Stepmonster's boxes. She told me she wasn't even surprised at its contents when she opened them, but was still shocked at Stepmonster's audacity. All of the boxes were filled with pink, frilly decorations. Some of them seemed to be the exact same items that Stepmonster had initially shown Laura and Nina. The signs, the balloons, the placemats, everything. Laura realized that's why Stepmonster intended to get to the venue earlier, to set up the baby shower she'd planned and pretty much force us all to party and Barbie heck with her. She called Nina to figure out what to do. Neither of them could come at 4 p.m., so it was almost inevitable for Stepmonster to get her way. The most obvious solution they came up with was to throw everything away. But Laura had a better idea. That night, they called me and Jane. "Hey, want to destroy a party in 2 hours?" Laura got home and invited Stepmonster to go to a salon with her, lying about having coupons. She agreed, and they planned on going right after Stepmonster was done preparing the baby shower. At 4 p.m. the next day, Stepmonster got to the venue. She was done setting things up by 5, and I'll admit the woman is fast, and quickly left to meet Laura at the salon. Once they were together, Laura texted Nina that the coast was clear. At that, me, Jane, and Nina went to the venue. Sure enough, Stepmonster had prepared her party. To make this shorter, I won't describe it, but I will say it was so pink that it almost gave Jane nausea. For the next 2 hours, Laura distracted Stepmonster at the salon while the three of us quickly took down every piece of decor Stepmonster had put up and replaced it with the pizza party stuff. We set up the activities, made up the tables, and put every pink item we found back in Stepmonster's boxes. It was actually really fun. We were done only minutes before the shower started. A handful of guests arrived before Stepmonster did, so I barely saw her all night. Laura told me that when they got there, Stepmonster's jaw dropped as she tried to make sense of what had happened to all her pink decor. My sister smiled, whispered, "Nice try," in her ear, and went to help Luke customize a bodysuit. Overall, the baby shower was everything we'd hoped for. Our friends were there, people had fun, and we had a ton of pizza. So I didn't really care that Stepmonster spent the whole party literally sulking in the corner. Nina did catch her trying to put little pink bows on top of the cupcakes, but she quickly shut that down. I give Laura and Nina full credit for saving the day. Stepmonster's interest in our baby quickly died after that. She stopped wearing her Nana shirts, didn't come to see us at the hospital when he was born, and refused to even acknowledge that he was a boy up until she met him a few weeks later. Up until we went no contact, she was a very loose definition of the word grandmother. I couldn't be more grateful that my son will never know her. Now this is crazy, but this is where the name Stepmonster comes from. OP says, it's due to an incident in which she abused my child while babysitting, which led me and my fiance to get a restraining order against her. Long story. It's the audacity of this Stepmonster lady to show no interest in her grandkid up until, she gets her way, I get to do what I want to do. Now you're showing interest. And then when you think and you go behind their backs planning to go on your plan, you think you got it all set up and everything looks great. Boom, they get back with pro-nuclear style revenge, destroy your party plans that should have never happened in the first place, and then you are shocked. You know what? I didn't even know about this restraining order till I read this edit, and that is insane to even give her that. I wouldn't even give her a second chance. That is just wild. But you know what? Narcissist. Thinks she gets her way, doesn't get it, throws a fit. Her way or the highway, right? Well, OP, you all did great with this. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, but holy crap, what a wild story. Make me sign a non-compete when I quit? Sure thing. Nuclear malicious compliance. Posted by Hunter 1980. My previous job title was as an office service consultant and technician. What is that, you may ask? Well, basically, if it was in an office environment, I was probably going to be dealing with it at some point in time. Over 21 years ago, I started working as a service technician fixing office equipment like copiers and printers, typewriters and faxes, and so on. The company I started working for was the local go-to for everything office related, from furniture, equipment, supplies, and more. The closest name brand office store was a 40-minute drive over a mountain, so it was steady work. We offered local service and delivery for everything that we did and sold. Now this was pre-Amazon days, so back then this was a big deal. After 2 years of me working there, the company expanded and merged with 2 other local businesses to include PC repairs, networking, phone systems, and providing dial-up service. The good old days of waiting 3 minutes or more for a web page to load. Now, prior to this merger, I had already gotten into PC work personally for myself and family and friends when the need arose, but with the merger, I was finally able to learn more and expand my knowledge. So now, my job included all office equipment, PCs, phone systems, and some networking. Since support service included so much, most places were sold service contracts where the customer would pay a flat monthly or quarterly or yearly rate for whatever they wanted included. You want us to deal with the copier and printers, and you'll deal with the PC issues as needed? No problem. You want us to take care of everything electrical in the office other than the actual electrical wiring? You got it. This went on for another 2 years, and eventually a bigger company from a major city 70 miles away wanted in on all the smaller town customers that they were missing out on. So they just bought out the company that I worked at. Basically, nothing really changed except the name on the paycheck and who had the final say on things. Everything else was business as usual. Now, prior to being bought out, things were run as a local business, and that's how the customers were treated, as local customers. After about a year and a half, the big city bosses felt that since they made big city profits, this should also apply out to local smaller town customers, so they started increasing prices on everything to match the big city numbers. This went about as well as you'd think. Customers started seriously complaining and dropping contracts. The office supplies section was dropped completely due to most folks going to the name brand store over the mountain and still saving money, as well as online ordering really starting to take off. My manager at the time had been the lead tech and service manager since I started and was on good terms with all our customers who had contracts, since he maintained and sold them. He hated how things were going and knew it was a matter of time before customers dropped our services due to the price hikes. He asked me if I would join him as his lead tech if he started his own business and promised me I'd eventually be service manager as the business expanded. Me being the stupid 20-something idiot that I was, I believed him and said, yeah. So he started his own business and cut ties with the big city company. Customers eagerly jumped ship and signed back up with the local guys they had known for years now back at local prices. The business shifted into focusing on everything office related except supplies. Our line of thinking was, we will do anything if the price is right. The boss shifted to sales and furniture while I was left to deal with everything technical. If the customer asked about something and he would say, sure thing, let me get you some numbers, and then tell me to figure out the technical side while he'd handle the logistics. Need a security camera system for the local water treatment plant? No problem. He'd figure out the floor plan, how much cable we'd need, and then I would figure out what hardware was needed, cameras, DVR, wireless points, and so on, and then how to make it all work. Switching jobs, going from crap job to the promised land. I worked for my manager's new business for roughly 9 or 10 years as the only technician in Dick's company. We had attempted to hire several other techs, but no one lasted more than a few months due to the sheer amount of things we worked on, the area we covered, and my boss being, I'll just say it, a dick. I averaged 3,000 miles a month and was working probably 50 to 60 hours a week for a 40-hour salary. With all my extra hours, I was making less than $10 an hour, losing my sanity, got 0 time off, and was generally fried from the service gig entirely. I told my boss I needed a raise to match my years of experience and the actual hours put in on the job, as well as some actual time off that if I took a day off, I was left the heck alone. He said, sure, we'll talk about it, and then he ghosted me when I tried to get time to talk. I let this slide for 2 months while I started looking for another job. I got lucky and ended up going to an open house at a local manufacturing plant that makes medical equipment. After going through and seeing what they made along with the tech that was backing it, I knew I wanted to work there. I applied and got a call back in less than a week. The guy who called was very nice, and we talked for a bit, and after the standard corporate questions, I explained how I went to the open house and was really interested in the new tech they were developing and couldn't wait to be a part of something bigger. I think this may have genuinely gotten to him because he asked me to hold for a few minutes. He wanted to check something. When he got back on the line, he asked if I could come in for a formal interview on site in 2 days. My response was, absolutely. 2 days later, I do my in-person interview and things go just as good as the phone interview. During the interview, I explained that if I got hired, I would need at least 2 weeks to let my current employer know and give them my notice. At the end, the lead interviewer shook my hand and said, "I can't officially say this today, but if I were you, I'd put in that 2-week notice. You'll be hearing from us by the end of the week with a couple of things that we need finalized to get your employment started." I was overjoyed. This new job would be hourly with overtime, way better pay than my current job with shift differential, 3 paid weeks vacation, and 10 days sick time. To me, this was basically hitting the lottery. Story time. Compliance. I was a field service tech for a total of 15 years. I've worked on more equipment than I can remember. I enjoyed it for the most part. Mainly office equipment, PCs, and networks, but I did have the occasional phone system, camera system, fire alarm, security door, badge system, remote entry system, and more. Due to the sheer amount of different tech I dealt with, I kept very meticulous notes, made wiring diagrams, recorded master passwords or backdoors to any of the systems I didn't work with on a regular basis, and kept backups of software related to any of the installs or operations. I did this with everything, unless otherwise specified by the customer, since I was going to be the guy fixing it if things went sideways. I was also in charge of training the customers on the tech. This led to me being a serious jack of all trades and some serious burnout due to being the only tech. I finally had the opportunity to switch jobs, so I put in my 2 weeks notice in with my old job, and this is the basic conversation I had with my old boss over the phone. The cast is as follows. Dick is my old boss, and me, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die." Or, I mean me. Dick says, "You're quitting? Why didn't you say something? Are you unhappy with your job?" I did say something and you kept brushing me off, so yes, I am unhappy. That's why I'm giving you a 2-week notice. There's no way I can get someone hired and trained to do your job in 2 weeks. What the heck am I supposed to do? You're my only tech. How am I going to take care of all my customers? It's not really my problem, but you have 2 weeks to come up with something. I'll keep doing everything till then, but I'm out after 2 weeks. Let me get back to you. I need to do some thinking. Insert an eye roll here and mentally thinking, no crap, Sherlock. A week later, Dick calls me into his office. "I'm working on getting a tech. Is there any way you can stay longer than another week till I get one?" No, I'm not putting off the new job since it pays so much better and has actual set hours." "What do you want? Tell me what I need to do to keep you around long enough till I get this new tech in." Seriously? Let me think. I thought about it for roughly 5 minutes and came up with this. Okay. I'll tell you what. Since my new job is second shift, I'll work for you in the mornings from 9 to 2. My time starts when I leave my house at 9 and ends with me being back in town at 2, so I have time to get to my new job. You will transfer my company cell phone into my own account since I've used it for all my contacts and personal family and friends. You will pay me hourly at the same rate as my new job, including the shift differential. I get to keep my tool bag and laptop. Any emergencies will be handled in this time frame, and I will be left alone after hours and on weekends. All I really wanted was the pay and the cell number. The number wasn't listed on any of Dick's company's sites or paperwork, and I really didn't want to get a new number and then have to update all my info I'd used it for. I wasn't concerned about the laptop or the tool bag. I was just going for broke to see what I could get away with. Dick replies, The pay and the cell number are fine, but you have to return all company property by end of week, including your tools and laptop. You can pick them up daily from the office and return them at the end of the day. I need access to them in case I need them to fix something. Also, you will sign a non-compete for 3 years once I get the new technician to keep you from servicing my clients. I say, okay, deal, but the cell gets transferred by end of day tomorrow. I'll call you in the morning when I get to the cell company. Deal. I shook his hand and went about my day. Now, I can hear all of you flying to your keyboards to jump into the comments to go, "You idiot, you didn't get it in writing." Well, and you're all absolutely correct. I should have gotten all that in writing. I was burnt out, I was tired, and I had no more craps to give. The next day, I got the cell number transferred over to my name and set out business as usual. Now, at the end of the week, I got what should be my last check at the old rate. I turned over my tools and laptop and had a very pleasant weekend. Monday rolls around and I work the hours I said I would and then go to my second job. I do this for the week without issue. Next week kicks off and I ask if there's been any progress on getting a tech. He says yes, they start next week. Okay, I'll start getting the new guy up to speed on our main systems next week then. Friday comes and I notice my check is still at my old rate. It's hourly now and the hours are correct, but not the rate. I try to get a hold of Dick, but no answer. Office lady says he's out of service till Monday and there's nothing she can do about my check. You can all see where this is heading. Monday rolls around and I meet the new tech and talk to Dick about my check. I say, so my check wasn't right and you ghosted me. What? No, I didn't ghost you. I was out of town in an area with poor reception. I'll talk to the payroll and get you a new check cut for the difference on Friday. Okay. Okay. Well, I'll start going over things with the new guy. Should I take him on any calls with me? Oh no, he's a trained tech. He's just not used to our brand of equipment. So go over them with him, show him the ins and outs and the software, and networking them and programming things, the usual stuff that we do to get a new machine set up. Okay, will do. Friday rolls up, and I'm sure you're all shocked to hear and read that payroll did not have a check cut for me. So I said screw it and went home. Didn't even bother trying to call Dick because I just knew I wasn't going to get an answer, right? I just turned my cell off. Monday comes, I don't go to the old job and I sleep in till noon. I left my cell off for the day and enjoyed the new job. Tuesday morning, I finally kick my cell back on and there's several voicemails and a couple of texts from Dick. He's wondering where I am, why I haven't showed up for 2 days. I calmly call him and have this conversation. Finally, what the heck? Where have you been for the last 2 days? I cut him off and saying, do you have a check for me? Check? What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about, and you know exactly what you did. You screwed me just like you did for years, and I let it happen. I thought I would help you out because I'm a nice guy, and you spit in my face. We're done. Lose this number. We're not done. You still haven't signed the non-compete. Seriously? You're being serious. You expect me to sign a non-compete after all of this? You will, or I'll sue you for breach of a verbal agreement. I have a recording of our conversation and a witness who heard you say you'd sign it. I transferred the cell number per our agreement and paid you for your time. I upheld my end of the bargain. I have no clue if any of that was true. If he did have it recorded, I'm sure it was edited to just the part where he agreed to the cell number and the pay, and of me agreeing to the non-compete. As for a witness, unless someone was listening through the office phone, there was no one else in his office when we talked. I have no clue if any of the BS he was saying was illegal, but I did know one thing. He had sued the previous company we worked for over them verbally agreeing to pay for something, and he had also recorded them. I know it dragged on for about 2 years and was settled out of court. I think it was cheaper for them to just pay him than to keep dealing with this bullcrap. Did I want any of that? Heck no. So I said, fine, leave it at the office, I'll be in to sign it. I want it done with this insane man-child. Story time, the build up to sweet release. Now you're all probably going, okay, the previous section is the compliance from the title, but where's the malicious part? Oh dear reader, I was never a strong believer in karma, but from what I had heard, she can be a cold, fickle witch. And I assure you, she does, in fact, come back to bite you in the butt with poetic justice and a sense of humor. A little over a year after signing the non-compete and being rid of Dick, I was enjoying my new job. I get a phone call from one of the last big customers I did a setup and install for a few months prior to me quitting. The customer, you ask? A woman's abuse center that had converted an old building into a safe house for victims. Dick had managed to get the job to redo the interior network, furniture, camera systems, security doors, and the alarm systems. He had also sold them a service contract for the camera, security doors, and alarm systems where we were on call 24/7 for the next 3 years. If something went wrong and the site could not remain secure, we had to get it fixed yesterday. This was not a small chunk of change, and it was due up front to get the best discount, but the abuse center had government backing, so they got Dick to agree to half up front and then payments after a year and a half. I knew the wording on these contracts because I had to give him worst case timeframes for getting things fixed if crap hit the fan. This will be important later. Now, due to the nature of the client and the job, I made sure my cell number had been laminated, and I literally glued it to all 3 systems with instructions to call me if they needed anything. The reason they were calling is they had had some personnel changes and needed to change the door codes. Not real secure if former employees can still access the building. They also wanted to set up remote camera access for new security monitoring purposes, and they needed to know how to do all of this. Now, if you read through the entire post, you know that I had made some very detailed notes, as well as instructions on how to do all of this. A set of all of this, as well as all the credentials to log into the systems, was in a nice secure binder on site. One problem, they couldn't find it. Not to worry, I would have planned ahead and made backups of all that and kept it on my company laptop with approval from the customer, right? If you said yes, you get 5 points. If you're thinking, this guy sounds seriously paranoid about this stuff and probably made another copy on maybe a disk or a thumb drive, again, you would get 5 points. I always kept a secure thumb drive on my keys and backed up this type of info religiously when I worked on jobs. You may distribute these points to whichever Hogwarts house of your choosing. I informed the client that I was no longer with Dick's company and they would need to contact them directly to get this taken care of, and I bid them a good day. 2 days later, I get a call from my replacement asking me for help regarding this matter. Not wanting to be a complete butthole and knowing that the abuse center needed this resolved, I informed him that the droids he was looking for were in fact on the company laptop. They were hiding on the D drive in a folder called Backups. There would be a folder with the client's name and all info should be right there in front of him. He asked me to hold on while he gets it, and I wait on the line while I hear him fiddling with the laptop bag and booting it up. Now, the new guy was someone who clearly was not ready to take over everything I did. And me, I'm facepalming and head desk in disbelief. And of course, Dick is someone who's about to be truly screwed. Here's the conversation. Oh, okay, new guy says. I got it booted up and I don't see a folder called Backups. It's not in the documents folder. Is it somewhere else? No, not the documents folder for the D drive. Then what drive? Okay, look, open up my computer and you should see the C drive and the D drive right next to it. Oh, okay, there it is. Hang on, a window popped up. It's saying insert disk. I'm sorry, it's saying what? It's saying please insert disk. Oh, okay. So are you clicking on the E drive by chance? No, there's only C and D drive. Our more tech-savvy readers probably know exactly what's going on. Okay, so hold on. So just to be absolutely clear, there is only drive C and drive D listed, no drive labeled E. That's what I'm hearing, correct? Yes. You didn't happen to reformat the laptop or anything like that. No, I only do copier and printer work. Dick's kid does the PC stuff. Can you tell me what the icon looks like in the bottom left-hand corner? Is it round with 4 color squares or 4 white squares? 4 white squares, why? Is Dick in the office? I'm gonna need to talk to him. No, he's out right now. Okay, please have him call me ASAP. I need to talk to him about this. Okay. Now, Dick's kid, Mini Dick, trust me, fitting name, was 15 years old when I quit. I had shown him some troubleshooting stuff, and he knew enough to be very dangerous if unsupervised. I mentioned this because when I turned in the laptop, it was using Windows 7, round button, 4 colors, but now it was Windows 10, 4 white squares. There was a Windows 10 USB in the laptop bag, and I was eventually going to upgrade it once I'd made sure all the software I used was compatible. The pit of my stomach knew exactly what happened. Either Dick asked him to do something with the laptop after I turned it in, or he took it upon himself to upgrade it to show his dad he could do this stuff. Pick one, but I knew he had deleted the separated partitions I had made on the hard drive to keep crucial data safe if Windows went tits up and I needed to restore or do a clean install and not have to worry about pulling the data. What Mini Dick had done was nuke the entire drive, and all of that backed up data was now gone. I get a phone call the next day, first thing in the morning. Dick says, "I was told you need to talk to me. Is this about the abuse center? I told the new guy to handle it and call you. You always kept instructions for all that crap. Just tell him where it is." "Oh, I already told him where to find the info, but there's a minor problem. It's gone." What do you mean gone? I know you kept backups." "I did. It was on the laptop when I turned it in. It is no longer there." "What the heck do you mean it's no longer there? Did you remote in and delete it? I know you did stuff like that to fix things. You shouldn't have been able to do that. I had Mini Dick make sure that you couldn't do that." "Oh, he certainly did that, but he also wiped out all of the backup data, Dick." "What?" "I can't say I'm 100% sure that's what happened, but I'm like 99.99% sure that's exactly what happened." Wait. You kept multiple backups. You told me that. That thing that you had on your keys. Yeah, you didn't give me that. Tell you what, you give me that and I won't pursue legal action since you didn't give it to me when you quit us." "Yeah, that's going to be a no for me." "The heck do you mean no? You have to give me that. You didn't turn in company property. I'll sue your butt." Okay, first, that thing I had on my keys was my personal device. I bought and paid for it with my money, so I didn't need to give it to you when I quit. Second, I wouldn't give it to you even if I could. I destroyed it after I quit because of the crap you just said. I just knew if I kept anything related to clients and you found out, you'd try to sue me like the man-child you are. Third, the only reason I'm talking to you, honestly, is because I just want to help the abuse center, not that you give a dang. "Oh, this is BS. You're lying. Just you wait. I'm gonna..." No clue how many times he called me and texted. I just put my phone on silent and enjoyed the rest of my day. Now, I'm sure many of you are probably calling BS. There's no way you remained that calm and said that. Remember, I worked for Dick for 9 years. I knew his habits. Number 1, I had 2 days between the abuse center calling me and the new guy calling me. I knew that new guy would need my help if he couldn't find the instructions I left. Lots of tech jargon involved, but it took me a week of mock building and tweaking everything to get those systems set up exactly how the customer wanted it. And if he factory reset them to use the default credentials, well, I enjoy doing it the very hard way. Number 2, I had an entire day between Dick calling me back and talking to the new guy. I had a raging justice boner the entire time. I had his nuts in a vice, and I knew it. Malice, best served cold with a side of mint. Previously on this long post, I remember I signed a non-compete with old Dick Boss, who pretty much screwed me over 10 years and I moved on with my life. Dick Boss had a client that he needed my help with. He threatened to sue me if I don't do what he wants. I hang up on him and hatch a devious scheme. After hanging up on Dick Boss, I was heartbroken and felt that it was my responsibility. Nay, my duty to contact the abuse center and inform them of the situation. All joking aside, this could have actually put people in danger if not resolved somewhat quickly. So I talked with the secretary and asked to speak to her boss. Luckily, it was the same woman in charge from when I installed the systems. She knew how much I cared for and busted my butt to get things exactly the way they wanted it. Karma equals the big boss woman. Ah yes, irony. And I am our valiant hero who only wishes to protect the innocent and maybe screw over his old boss in the process. Of course, Dick is the former boss who done screwed up big time. Karma says, "Hello, me, it's been a while. I understand you wanted to talk to me about the issues we need to resolve with our system that you set up for us." I do. I wanted to inform you that sadly, I no longer work for Dick's company." "Oh, well, that's too bad. So why are you calling me if you won't be helping us get things fixed?" "Well, I wanted to inform you of the entire situation, along with reasons as to why I can't help, and give you some options to get this resolved." I proceed to inform her of the non-compete, and all the following information is just my best guess, and I'm offering up my opinion free of charge. She can choose to act as she sees fit. I let her know that Dick's company most likely does not have the credentials and documentation needed to perform the task that she needs done. I can't say for certain though, wink wink. I inform her that if Dick's company does not have the proper info, they may suggest resetting the equipment, and it will most likely take even longer to get things fixed, as well as their current setup being wiped out, and only the factory codes will work. Also, the system will most likely not function the way they need it to. Again, I can't say for certain, nudge nudge. I kindly remind her of the service contract that she has on the equipment and to look carefully at the wording on it, as it may come in very handy. Say no more, sir. I let her know that I wish there was some way I could consult with her or help her, but due to the non-compete, there is no way I can help her since she is currently Dick's client. I make several suggestions on how to possibly deal with the situation after reviewing some things and getting options. After all this, she thanks me for my time and said she was going to be busy the next few days. Now, here is where all the malicious compliance comes to a head. I mentioned above for Karma to really look at that service contract for one major reason. The wording on her contract stated that if Dick's company was unable to resolve any issues the customer had within 3 days, then Dick's company was on the hook for any expense the customer incurred to work around said issues. Now, this was pretty standard wording on our service contracts, but they were mostly for smaller equipment and were worded as 2 business days. Basically, if company can't fix a printer or a copier and the customer has to go get things outsourced, the company had to pay for it. Karma's contract was worded as 3 days due to the site being occupied every day and weekends had no visitors allowed. I knew this because when Dick was selling the contract, he had me talk it up in front of the abuse center's board. To me, worst case scenario meant that the main systems all somehow got nuked. We'd be out same day to confirm DOA equipment and overnight new units that day. Again, worst case is it takes 2 days to get a system in on site. I drop it in place, reprogram, and boom, they're back up. The door systems all had emergency push bars on the inside, and the 2 inner steel doors had keys if power and backup power was dead. They were kept off site for security. Now, onto the possible situations and solutions. Since they could not remove the old codes and enter in new ones for the personnel changes, this posed a security risk. To remedy this, Karma should hire outside security to be on site till the old codes could be deactivated. If the company cannot get the system working soon, then Karma should contact the manufacturer's support line and request an on-site technician to come out and fix it for them. I know what took me a week to do would probably take a certified tech a couple hours at most, since they know the systems inside and out. However, those techs are heckishly expensive, and getting them on site quickly, you better get some lube and try to spread your cheeks for that incoming railing. If company cannot fix issues, then why did they sell the service contract to begin with? If they cannot service the equipment, Karma should get the contract canceled and try to get money back since Dick's company didn't support the products that they said they would. I got a phone call 2 days later from Dick, who was surprisingly non-threatening to start. So, I'm in a bit of a bind here. I need you to help me out with the abuse center. What do you want me to do? I signed a non-compete and I sure as heck ain't helping you out for free. I thought about it, and I can hire you as a consultant to go out and get things fixed for me so you're not competing. You'll be working for me. And how much will you be paying me to consult? How does $150 a day sound? $150 a day? I don't know, man. That sounds awful cheap to me. Cheap? That's way more than you get at your new job. You misunderstood me. I meant cheap for you. Explain. I'm just guessing. It's probably costing you a lot more than $150 a day to pay for outside security around the clock at the abuse center. How did you? It was you! I'm gonna... Phone rings again. I pick up to more screaming. Phone rings a couple more times and I send it to voicemail. I think it was about 4 hours later he called me again. Hello? Slight inflection of joy in my tone. Silence for about maybe 10 seconds. Dick says, How much? Well, to be honest, I can't help you. What? Obviously, I have to have a paper trail since I can't trust you, and for me to consult, I'd have to give you a detailed invoice that would list why and what I'm consulting for. However, due to the rather descriptive non-compete you made me sign that specifically states I may not service any of your clients for 3 years, my hands are tied, legally speaking. But good luck with that. I immediately blocked his number and laughed so hard I cried for probably 30 minutes. I don't think I've ever felt that good. Fallout, hazmat suits suggested. I got some details from the secretary at the abuse center. She was a chatty Cathy and loved drama. She talked my ear off when I did the install, so I called her a couple months later. Karma ended up having to get an on-site tech from the manufacturer to reset and redo everything. Not sure how long it took, but I know it wasn't cheap. On-site security was kept in place till the system was back up and running. Karma and the board went after Dick for all the contract money, the expenses incurred, the installation cost, equipment cost, even the legal fees. From what the secretary told me, he settled out of court. Now, she didn't have an exact number or what all they got him for, but it was dang close to 6 figures total. I ran into several secretaries from other businesses that I used to service and got even more details later that year. His tech quit, and he ended up selling the service side of the business to a company over the mountain. He sold his local storefront and downsized to an office closer to his home and focused mainly on furniture installs. Just last year, I ran into one of the owners from back when I started as a tech. Him and Dick were friends, and according to him, Dick is out in Texas working at a furniture place while his wife and ex and kids are still in state. He used her name and I didn't bother asking the status. I genuinely did not care. Holy cow, OP. I mean, this really was nuclear malicious compliance. So here's the thing. You stood your ground. But, this guy, he was totally trying to take advantage of you, right? He just tried to force you in a corner with this non-compete. And you were burnt out. You just wanted out of there. So you signed it. And you just wanted done with this annoying guy. But the thing is, he knew that he could push you like that, or try to, is the thing, and just annoy you. It's similar to when a kid says, hey, let me do this thing. No, let me do this thing. No. They're going to go till they get the answer they want, and you were able to push back against that. You had the knowledge and you knew your stuff about the work, so you could do your due diligence in setting it up. You also knew the new guy, whenever the system was completely wiped out, you knew that was probably the problem there, and it was actually. Funny how Dick lets his kid that's a teenager in with such important stuff that you don't need to mess with without experience. You can totally screw stuff up, which further leads to show his true incompetence when it comes to all this. The kid is actually helping you here, right, with this whole story. It worked in your favor because he wiped out the whole PC when he shouldn't have, and hopefully taught Dick a lesson. Now your background and experience played in your favor as you pushed in for the center to try to find out what went wrong, how to fix it, what you could do, what you couldn't charge. You pushed it with saying, hey, I want to get all this stuff, like the laptop and the phone. You just really held him to the limit. And then it ultimately, when you pushed him hard enough to these limits, just ultimately came back to burn him down for 6 figures, downsize his business, move him out of the area away from his family, all because your malicious compliance lit the match and went nuclear. Way to go, OP. President of HOA wants me to join, ends up wanting to leave the country. Posted by Also Not the Mama. This is about a property that OP owns and rents out. The background. A million years ago, my property was part of a large farm. I bought it about 30 years ago, long after the farm was broken up, but before there was any development near it. The piece of land that I got was near the back entrance that joined into a dirt road that ran past. The more expensive plots were near the tarred road in the front. I originally bought a large chunk of the land intending to do some farming, but that never happened. About 20 years ago, some of the owners got organized, we'll call them the Organized Owners, OO, and had the area designated as a municipal suburb. The municipality agreed to put in tarred roads, water, and electricity if a certain percentage of the properties were developed. A construction company linked to the OO went around contacting the owners who had land but no buildings, offering to build houses for us at a very, very reasonable price, contingent on them getting a certain minimum amount of people signing up. While this was happening, one of the OO approached me and offered to buy half of my property. I agreed, and the money I got for the sale, which was about 4 times what I'd paid for the entire chunk of land 10 years prior, combined with the small loan from the bank, gave me what I needed to pay for a house to be built, and it was a fairly large and nice house too. I stayed in the house for a few years and my mom moved in with me. I had decided to subdivide the property again and build her a house next to mine, but unfortunately, an undiagnosed tumor took her before the house could even be started. Well, it was diagnosed, but too late to do anything. Soon after she died, we moved out of the house and started renting it out. About a few weeks before we moved out, the OO I'd sold the land to started talking about starting an HOA. I was not interested, and I left soon after. About 2 years later, the neighbor OO contacted me. There were 2 roads entering the area these days. The original tarred road that was near where the farmhouse had been and was entered from a fairly busy main road, and my dirt road back entrance, which was now a tarred entrance from a wide but not very busy municipal road. The HOA was trying to get the old farm road blocked off to improve security and decrease through traffic, and wanted the road next to my property to be the main and only entrance to the HOA community, and they were pressuring me to join. I said no, and I was adamant, and eventually they accepted that. But they told me they wanted to have a sign near the road welcoming people to the neighborhood, and the only practical place to put it was on the edge of my property. They also wanted to build a little guard hut and have a security guard permanently monitoring who went in and who came out, and they wanted to build his shed on my property. We came to an agreement whereby they would mow the lawn and pay the equivalent of about $35 per month in exchange for the land that they needed. I was very happy with this arrangement since the property was fairly large and it didn't really cost them anything since they already had a full-time gardening service servicing the HOA. This all happened over a decade ago. They eventually got the other main road blocked off, and the HOA is paying for a rent-a-cop to be permanently stationed close to my property, as well as mowing the lawn and paying me enough money for takeaways for the family each month. I'm occasionally contacted by members of the HOA to get me to sign up, but I'm really not interested. My property has been rented to the same tenant for all these years, and everything there is going well for me. Until about 3 years ago, when someone scared the crap out of my tenant's young daughter by making strange noises and shooting a gun close to her bedroom window 3 or 4 times over about a month. This scared my tenant, and I guess it scared the HOA because they and my tenant contacted me with a proposal. I joined the HOA, and they give me exclusions from the HOA rules, including exclusions from paying the monthly fees, and in addition, they will build a wall around the entire HOA neighborhood, including electric fencing and security cameras. They told me they had wanted to do this for a while, but they were unwilling to build the wall on property that was not in the HOA. I couldn't see the downside, so I agreed. The dishonest dealings. It took a little over a year to build that wall and get everything completed, which, well, it's quite fast. And then a month to the day after everything was done, my tenant got an HOA warning about his dogs barking. He told the HOA that while the property was in the HOA, it was exempt from the rules. The HOA told him that they had canceled the exemptions and that he had 30 days to comply. He contacted me, and I opened some mail I'd gotten from the HOA, which I'd ignored it since I was supposed to be exempt from the rules and the fees. Oh man, did I get a surprise. They had retroactively canceled the exemptions, and they were claiming this. 1, that I pay late fees going back over a year. 2, that the easement agreement had been canceled, and they were retroactively canceling it a year back because the HOA contract allowed them to use, quote, small unused portions, end quote, of HOA members' land for the common good for free. 3, that I refund them the money that they had paid for the easement over that period. And 4, that I owed them money for the garden service mowing the large lawn. And 5, that I would be fined for each infraction that my tenant failed to remedy. This started an expensive process involving lawyers in the court system that ended with the judge telling me what the HOA had done was, well, mostly legal. They had the right to revoke the exemptions, but that they had to give me 30 days notice. As I was walking to my car, the neighbor OO, the one who had bought half of my land so many years ago, told me that I was stupid to have refused to join when the HOA started, as I could have been a founder member, whatever that means, and that the next time I should be sure to understand the documents that I sign before signing them. The malicious compliance. Neighbor OO was right. I should have read the contract better. Also, I was interested in what it meant to be a founding member. Spoiler, nothing. So when I got home, I grabbed the HOA contract that I'd signed, as well as all the other documentation they'd provided me with. I started reading. I was determined to break every rule I could find a loophole to break. I didn't get past the first page. While the street address of the property is used to identify it for all practical purposes, in the city records it has to be a unique property number that has to be used on legal records. When my mom moved in, I'd subdivided the remaining property, but I hadn't yet started building on it. And when I gave the HOA the easement all those years ago, it had been on the property that I'd sliced off for my mom. And when the HOA set up the contract, they had simply used the property number from the easement. The next afternoon, the neighbor OO delivered and had me sign for 2 documents. One telling me that my exemptions would expire in 30 days, and one letting me know that the easement would no longer be required after 30 days. I think he was being a bit malicious here, because I lived about an hour away from the property and he drove out himself. The revenge. Exactly 30 days to the hour after the HOA had given me the 30 days notice, I knocked on the neighbor OO's door. Did I mention he was the president of the HOA and had him sign for the 2 documents? The first was that I planned to build a house on my HOA property, which confused him. And the second was notice that they had 30 days to remove from the property the guard shed, the parts of the electric boom that were on my property, as well as the sign. He tried to engage me, but I ignored him, climbed into my car, and I drove off. Early the next morning, I got a call from the HOA lawyer who explained to me that their junk would be staying on my property since it was in an unused part of my land. I explained that I was building a house there and that the land would not be unused anymore. I could hear the smirk as he told me that building a second house to be spiteful would not be accepted by the courts. I sure hoped that he could hear the smirk in my voice when I told him that the property in question did not have a house and was, in fact, barely large enough for a house to be built and would not be large enough for any extraneous buildings. I then told him to go look up the property in question and then call me back. I had sliced off just enough to be legal, which was just enough to build a small house. It took them just under 5 days to get back to me. Their lawyer told me that the terms of the easement meant that I could not cancel without their permission, so I emailed him a photo of the document they sent to me canceling the easement. That afternoon, neighbor OO invited me to lunch, his treat, to discuss the problem. I said, nah thanks. He extended the offer again 2 days later, and again I said, no thanks. Others of the original OO contacted me to try to talk. Some sounded aggressive, some sounded sympathetic. I said, no thanks, to each of them. Eventually, the lawyer phoned and asked if we could come to some sort of agreement. I asked what he had in mind, and he told me that he was prepared to discuss exclusions in exchange for access to my property. So I said, no thanks, and please don't call me again. About 9 days before their 30 days was up, I got a call from a different lawyer. He said he wanted to negotiate a surrender, his words, not mine, and I agreed to meet him at his office the next day. I'd already had documents drawn up, and the meeting was as simple as me giving him the documents and him reading them over. My new easement offer was 1. Included everything offered by the old easement offer. 2. I changed the line mow the lawn to get the property to HOA standards and keep it there since it was, well, now in the HOA. 3. Would cost them about $500 per month instead of $35. In 3A, this amount would increase with inflation. Now, the previous contract didn't include that bit. Now, when canceled for whatever reason, the HOA would have to pay me a cancellation fee of around $7,500. And the contract automatically terminated 30 days after any disciplinary action was taken against me, my tenant, or the property, known as the property, or any complaints were levied by the HOA against the property, or any legal action was taken against the property by anyone in the HOA. The next thing was that the lawyer who had offered the negotiate surrender would be allowed to mediate any disputes between us at the HOA's expense. And the seventh thing, the HOA would pay all of my legal fees if any legal action was taken against me. I deliberately left some insane things in there so that I could appeal to concede some points or be negotiated down when the HOA got indignant about the points that I actually cared about. The lawyer did not look happy. He said that my proposal sounded unfair, but that he'd have the HOA president look at them. I reminded him that in 8 days, I'd be setting a group of men armed with sledgehammers and anger management issues loose on whatever of theirs was still on my property. That evening, I got an irate call from the HOA president. He told me he was never going to sign the new contract. I said, okay. He then told me I was charging too much per month and that it should be at the same rate as the previous contract. I pointed out that when I signed the previous contract, the area was under development and there was at least one other road leading in and out, but that now there was only mine. And besides, mine was now developed with everything they needed. He told me that I was forcing them to sign a document they didn't want to sign. Well, I told him that he was free to just not sign it. He whined about anything and everything that he could think of, and then eventually told me I'd be hearing from his lawyer. The next morning, Surrender Lawyer called to ask if I'd be willing to come to their offices to sign the contract. I agreed. When I got there that afternoon, I learned that Surrender Lawyer was not a lawyer, but a paralegal. He handed me the contract and asked me to sign it. He laughed when I told him that I'd have to read through it first to make sure nothing was changed, and mumbled something that sounded like, I'm sure you would. I read the contract. Nothing had been changed. Not a single thing. And the HOA president had signed it, with the surrender paralegal signing as witness. I looked at him and said, why did he sign this? It was stupid to sign it. And the paralegal looked at me and said, I started telling him that signing it would be a bad decision, but he told me that I wasn't being paid to think or give legal advice and to shut up. So I shut up. I said, do you understand what he signed here? He looks at me and nods. He said, I asked him if I should have one of the lawyers look at it before giving it to you, and he told me that we'd already billed enough for this, and that he'd sign it and then sue me after their easement was safe. This happened about 1.5 years ago. It took 6 months for the HOA to find out how screwed they were. They wanted to sue me, but their lawyers explained to them that there was no way to win. Even if the court sided with them, all they would get is the easement contract voided, and they did not think that the court would side with them. The lawyers were adamant about one thing. The HOA could not live with the HOA pays my legal fees if legal action was taken against me, since it didn't limit the people taking legal action against me to the HOA. As worded, the HOA would be forced to pay my legal fees if anyone took legal action against me. They argued that the courts would probably not enforce that, since the context of the agreement was to do with the HOA. And I told them I was prepared to find out, since the HOA would definitely be the ones taking action against me if they challenged it. I eventually signed an addendum to the contract that said that the neighbor OO, the HOA president, would personally pay all my legal fees unless he held no position at all in the HOA, and that the HOA would pay all legal fees if the HOA took legal action against me. He resigned from the HOA at the end of that meeting. I politely told him in front of everyone that he should not sign documents unless he understands what he's signing, He didn't look pleased at all. It came out during the mediation. You cannot imagine how happy the lawyers were that their paralegal was mediating, that without the ability to control access to the HOA neighborhood through the security boom partially on my property, remember the HOA had become a gated community a number of years back, the HOA would be in breach of their own articles and would be dissolved. I also learned, and it should have been obvious to me, that all the security cameras were wired and all terminate in the guardhouse and guard shed. So basically, it was my way or the end of the HOA. That first mediation was really quite funny. My paralegal looked more than a little glum as we assembled and he called everyone to order. I suspected that he had been told to work against me, so I took the initiative. I reminded everyone there that I had agreed to let paralegal mediate, but that I had agreed to no arbitration at all. If I didn't feel like the proceedings were fair, I'd leave and they could go ahead and just sue. Paralegal brightened up and things actually went quite well. I'm writing this after getting home from the latest mediation. I built a paddling pool for the neighborhood dogs, as in I made it myself. I dug a hole, packed it with stone, and added a concrete finish. It was my first attempt, and if I say so myself, it looked, well, terrible. The HOA called for a mediation meeting, what they do now, instead of taking official action. I've declined their mediation request in the past, in which they told me, as nicely as they could, that the paddling pool was an eyesore right at the entrance of the HOA. I asked them to create a list of what needed to be fixed and how it needed to be fixed to give me at the next meeting. The list was extensive. It basically required the pool to be rebuilt from scratch. I asked them if there was any way to reduce the cost on the work they needed to get it up to HOA standards, and they assured me that there was not. I thanked them, pulled out a copy of the agreement where they had agreed to, quote, get the property to HOA standards, end quote, which I had highlighted, and then handed it to them with the list. I told them the HOA usually preferred if these things were dealt with within 30 days. They started arguing until the mediator reminded them that they could not force me to comply without causing the easement to end. I should mention that their lawyers usually no longer attend these things. They said they would get it done. I also learned a lot about neighbor OO today. For one, I found out that neighbor OO sold his property about 3 months back and is apparently leaving the country for Australia. Next, I found out that the HOA had successfully sued him for a crap load of money that they had lost to his mismanagement as part of his vendetta against me. 3, I also learned that he had a vendetta against me. I have no idea what I did to upset him. I'm not sure if I'll screw with the HOA anymore. I already think I'm so close to breaking them, the only thing stopping them from canceling the contract is the massive financial loss if they do. I guess a lot depends on how they treat me and my tenants going forward. Also, I do like the monthly payments though, so I'm motivated to play nice. Oh, OP, so this one's killer because this HOA was going to sneak in and just destroy OP and everything that he wanted for his property, but then he did his due diligence, research all the stuff, find everything, and put together a contract, a setup that just completely was in his favor and not in the HOA's. The old OO, the big guy, the president, comes in, he signs it, oh, whatever, we're paying you for this, not that, blah, blah, blah. Huge mistake, right? Like if you're going to sign a contract, I know whenever we have the terms of service that come up for things, we always, all of us, everybody listening right now, goes down and skims on by and does not accept them. Bad move when it's a legal document, and bad move when OP is against you. So if you're going to go and you're going to tell a person that is working for you, that knows this stuff, and you don't, to screw them, I'm going to handle this all myself. Here is your sign, as the old comedian said. If you know who that is, let me know in the comments. And boom, OP, you have them wrapped around your little finger, and you are the winner here. And I hope your little paddling pool does awesome, because that is just the icing on the cake right here. OP, you have won. OO, you're out of the country, and you definitely lost this one. Way to go, OP. Check out my next ProRevenge compilation here to continue your listening session, and thank you so much for checking this one out.